He thought I didn't know. Thought he was being clever. Late nights. Secret texts. Smirks that weren't meant for me. But I knew. I always knew. They say a woman's intuition is soft. Gentle. A whisper in the back of her mind. Mine was a scream. And yet I stayed quiet. Not because I was weak, but because I was watching. Every lie, every flinch, every deleted message. I was collecting them like evidence in a courtroom only I would preside over. We had been married for 7 years. 7 years of loyalty from my side. Of sacrifices. Of silences swallowed so he could feel louder. And he threw it away for someone whose perfume lingered on his shirt like a mocking ghost. It started with the missed calls. Not mine, hers. A number I didn't recognize flashing on his phone while he was in the shower. I memorized it, then erased the call log before he noticed. I smiled that night while we had dinner. He didn't notice how quiet I was. He never noticed anymore. I began to trace patterns. Sudden work trips. Sudden cologne changes. Sudden distance. And a sudden guilt in his touch that made my skin crawl. He'd say, "You're too serious these days." I wanted to laugh. Because being married to a liar can do that to a woman. Make her forget how to be soft. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. I knew better. You don't corner a snake until you're ready to crush its head. So I waited. And while I waited, I built a plan. My husband was sloppy with everything, except his money. That he kept tight. Everything was joint, except his little emergency fund. What he didn't know was, I had an emergency of my own. And I was done waiting for it to explode. I started gathering documents. Bank statements. Insurance policies. Screenshots. Anything that would help me win quietly. Because I didn't want a scene. I wanted closure. And justice. The kind that doesn't require screaming, just signatures. He once said to me after watching a friend go through a divorce, "If you ever cheated on me, I'd make sure you walked away with nothing." I remember blinking, swallowing that bitter lump in my throat, and quietly replying, "Funny. I'd make sure you walked away with everything you deserve." He laughed. He didn't see the storm behind my eyes. One night he came home late. Again. He smelled like vanilla and guilt. I had dinner ready. I smiled. Served his plate like nothing was wrong. He didn't notice that I'd moved the cutlery drawer earlier that day, or that I'd swapped out his favorite wine, or that I didn't ask how his meeting went. He ate in silence. And I watched. Not out of love, but calculation. This man, the one chewing my food sitting in my chair under my roof, had no idea what was coming. I slept beside him that night like I always did. Only difference was, I had already emptied the safety deposit box that morning. Already met with the lawyer. Already scheduled the house appraisal. He thought I was asleep when he checked his phone at midnight. But I saw it. That smile. That smug little text. "Same time tomorrow, babe." I closed my eyes. And smiled too. Because tomorrow I wouldn't be here. Tomorrow, he'd come home to an empty closet, a cold kitchen, and divorce papers waiting where his dinner used to be. He thought he was playing chess. But I had flipped the board. And by the time he realized it, I'd already won. The sun rose quietly that morning. Just like I planned. And I didn't even stay to watch it rise from our bedroom window. Because by the time he stirred under those sheets, I was already gone. No note.
No goodbye.
No last word. Only the gentle click of the front door closing behind me, and the silence I left in my place. I moved in with Ria, my oldest friend. She didn't ask questions. She just made coffee, opened her arms, and let me fall apart without judgment. That's the kind of love I wish I'd married. I remember standing in her kitchen that first morning, clutching the warm mug like it was the only thing holding me together. "I did it," I whispered, barely able to believe it myself. Ria didn't flinch. She just nodded. "As you should have." But even freedom has a hangover. And mine came fast. Because once the adrenaline wore off, what settled in was grief. Not for him, but for the life I thought I was building. The years I gave to a man who gave them to someone else. Do you know what it feels like to realize your love was a solo performance? That every memory you thought was mutual was just you loving for two? It's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream. Sinks. Quiet. Heavy. Slow. I spent the next few days sorting through the legal motions. emails from the lawyer, calls from the bank, asset sheets, the cold language of detachment. Each document a step toward undoing a life. He texted me once. Just once. Where are you? What is this? I didn't answer. What was there to say? Everything he needed to know was already printed in black ink and delivered by courier. He didn't call. Didn't show up. Cowardice wears many masks. His favorite was silence. And I'd learned to read every one of them. Ria helped me pack the rest of my things 2 weeks later. I told her I didn't want anything.
No furniture. No decor.
No traces of the version of me who stayed too long. All I took were my clothes, my photos of Dad, and my journals. The rest could rot in that pretty little house he now occupied alone. They say divorce is a death. I think it's more like resurrection. You don't just end something. You crawl out of it. One limb at a time. Covered in bruises. But breathing. Some nights I still woke up gasping. Not from dreams of him. But of the version of me who believed him. Who made excuses for him. Who looked in the mirror and asked, what am I doing wrong? God, I want to hold that girl. Tell her it was never her fault. I never told my mother. Not at first. She liked him. Thought he was charming. I didn't have the heart to break hers too. But eventually the truth demanded space. And when I finally told her, I expected disappointment. But what I got was tears. And one sentence I'll never forget. You deserved better. I should have said that sooner. She was right. I did. But sometimes we don't know what we deserve until we're forced to start over. Until we walk away. And look back at the ashes. Not in sorrow but in relief. The last time I saw him, he didn't look like the man I once loved. He looked small. Angry. Panicked. He stood outside the mediator's office. Eyes bloodshot, voice bitter. You're ruining me, he hissed. I tilted my head. Smiled.
No.
I'm just not letting you ruin me anymore. And with that I walked past him. Into the building. Into my new life. Into myself. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Too quiet. Like the silence after a storm, when the sky is clear, but the earth is still soaked. I didn't cry much. Not anymore. The tears had dried up long before I left him. What lingered now was something else. A mix of exhaustion and clarity. I started sleeping better. No late-night texts making me paranoid. No pretending to be asleep while he slipped into the bathroom to answer her calls. No waiting for love to return to a place it had long since abandoned. Freedom doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it just feels like rest. The kind that seeps into your bones and says, you're safe now. Ria was the kind of friend who didn't offer cliches. She didn't say, you'll meet someone new. Or everything happens for a reason. She just passed me her half-eaten fries one evening and said, you were always too good for that man. And I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that made my ribs ache. That weekend I took myself out for breakfast. Alone. Just me, a window seat, and a book I hadn't finished in 2 years. No phone buzzing with location lies. No checking the clock every 5 minutes. I ordered pancakes with extra syrup. I smiled at the waitress. And I breathed. Really breathed. A part of me felt guilty for enjoying it. Isn't that strange? To feel guilty for peace? But trauma does that. It convinces you that pain is your baseline. That joy is suspicious. But I was done letting guilt govern my moments. He sent flowers a week later. No note. Just lilies, my least favorite. Proof again of how little he knew me. I didn't bother asking who told him where I was. Didn't matter. I had already drawn my line. So I left the flowers on the sidewalk and walked back inside.
No tears.
No calls. Just silence. My kind of revenge. He tried again. A message this time. Can we talk? 3 words. 3 years too late. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then deleted it. Without reading the rest. Because closure, I'd learned, doesn't come from the person who broke you. It comes when you decide they can't reach you anymore. I was rebuilding. Not just my life, but myself. Piece by jagged piece.
No rushing. No apologies.
Just a quiet promise to the woman I used to be. You won't be forgotten again. I joined a yoga class. Not because I believed in stretching away the pain, but because it felt good to show up for myself. To move. To breathe. To exist in a room where no one expected anything from me. The instructor said something once that stuck. Let go of what no longer serves you. I closed my eyes and saw his face and exhaled. My lawyer called a few days later. The divorce was moving faster than expected. He wasn't contesting anything anymore. Too busy scrambling, maybe, or realizing he had nothing left to hold over me. He even gave up the house. Didn't fight for it. Didn't ask for a buyout. Just walked away. Maybe he thought I'd stay and rot there. But I'd already decided. I didn't want that house either. Not the one where I lost myself. Where I learned to make myself small so he could feel big. So I sold it. Quietly. Without telling anyone. And used the money to start over in a city where no one knew my name. I didn't run away. I chose distance.
I choisi ligne.
The apartment I moved into wasn't much. 1 bedroom. Leaky faucet. Thin walls. But it was mine. Every picture, every plant, every dish, placed exactly how I liked it. And that, to me, was everything. For the first time in years, I felt safe in my own space. No lies. No fear. Just me. And the soft sound of a woman learning to love her solitude. I didn't expect to find joy in ordinary things again. But I did. Slowly. Quietly. In the way sunlight spilled across my floor in the morning. In the click of my keys unlocking my front door. In the peace of cooking dinner for one with no performance, no expectations. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft. Like healing often is. You don't even realize it's happening. Until you catch yourself smiling with no one around to see it. I started journaling again. Not about him. But about me. Who I was before the chaos. What I wanted now, after the wreckage. One day I wrote, I never hated him. I hated the version of myself that kept begging him to love me. And then I cried. Not because I was still hurt, but because I finally understood. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them break you. And forgiveness doesn't mean giving them access again. I forgave him. Truly. But I never texted him again. Never looked back. Because forgiveness is something I did for me. Not for his comfort. Around that time, I got a message from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Elise. And she had a question for me. Did you and my boyfriend used to be married? My heart sank. I already knew the answer. But still I asked, who's your boyfriend? She sent a picture. Of course. It was him. Smiling like nothing ever happened. I stared at that photo for a long time. Not because I missed him. But because I didn't feel anything. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just a distant recognition. Like seeing a character from an old book you no longer reread. I told Elise the truth. Gently. Kindly. Not to get revenge. But to set her free. Because no woman deserves to learn the hard way like I did. She thanked me. Told me she had suspected it for a while. Said I saved her. Maybe I did. Maybe I just passed the torch. Either way, I slept well that night. A week later, I saw he blocked me on everything. Instagram. Email. Even Venmo. It made me laugh. Imagine being so scared of a woman's truth, you'd rather delete her than face it. But that's what cowards do. They run. Even from pixels. I didn't need to block him back. Because you don't build fences when you've already burned the bridge. I spent my next birthday alone. By choice. I bought myself cake.
Lit à candle.
Whispered a wish I'll never repeat. Then I danced around my living room barefoot. Music blasting, heart full. It was the first birthday in years where I didn't cry in the bathroom after dinner. The first one where I didn't wait for a man to remember me. I remembered myself. And that was enough. Later that night, I opened a bottle of wine and reread one of my old journal entries. The ones I used to write when I was still with him. Every page was a woman begging for scraps. Now I wrote pages full of peace. Of self-celebration. Of boundaries and bloom. Healing isn't linear. Some mornings I still woke up with that heavy ache in my chest. But it faded faster now. And the voice in my head that once whispered, "You're not enough," was slowly learning to say, "You always were." I started wearing lipstick again. The deep red one I used to love. The one he said was too much for every day. I wore it to the grocery store, to the cafe downstairs, to walk around the park. Because now, too much was exactly what I wanted to be. I cut my hair. Not because of some dramatic need to erase him, but because I finally looked in the mirror and wanted to see me. Not the woman who smiled through betrayal. Not the wife who bent herself to be palatable. But the version of me that felt dangerously alive. And God, I had missed her. One Saturday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Curiosity won. Picked up. And there it was, his voice. Shaky. Forced casual. "Hey, I heard you moved. You doing okay?" I said nothing, because the truth didn't deserve an answer from me anymore. He filled the silence with a nervous laugh. Said something about just checking in. I hung up. Didn't block him. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just ended the call like it was a spam number. Because that's what he was now. A minor inconvenience I no longer needed to explain. That evening I made a list. People I no longer owe explanations to. Him. Anyone who thought I stayed too long. Anyone who asked, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Myself on the days I forget how strong I am. Growth is weird. It doesn't show up with fireworks. It slips in quietly, when you say no without guilt, when you eat alone without shame, when you delete old pictures without flinching. One night I walked past a restaurant we used to love. He had taken her there once. I remember because I had seen the reservation email on his iPad. Back then I had pretended not to see. Now I stood outside that same place, looked through the window and saw strangers at our old table. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sadness. Just a strange sense of peace. Time had erased our presence from that space. And maybe it had started to erase his presence from my life too. That realization felt like freedom. I started sketching again. It had been years. He used to call it a cute little hobby. Now it was my therapy, my meditation, my rebellion. Every pencil stroke was a reclamation. Of my hands, my time, my spirit. I shared my first drawing online anonymously. It was of a woman standing in a storm, hair wild, eyes closed, hands open. Captioned, "She stopped asking the wind to calm down. She learned to dance in it instead." It went viral. Thousands of women messaged me, saying it felt like their story, their divorce, their betrayal, their freedom. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel alone. Because maybe pain isolates us, but healing connects us. Ria and I started going out more. Brunches, pop-up art shows, poetry nights. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me, this proud, quiet look in her eyes. "You're coming back to life," she said once. I smiled. "I never died," I replied. "I was just buried." It's funny what people remember about you. Even after you've burned the old version of yourself to ash, they still reach for the girl who stayed too long, who forgave too easily, who laughed even when she was bleeding. One afternoon, I bumped into an old friend. Not close, just someone from before. The version of me who smiled through dinner parties while my marriage rotted quietly. She blinked when she saw me, really saw me. "You look different," she said. I tilted my head, smiled gently. "No, I look the same. I just stopped hiding." She asked if I still talked to him. I said no. She looked disappointed. And I realized then, some people don't like it when you leave the cage they've accepted, because it reminds them they could have walked out too. But I wasn't living for comfort anymore. I was living for truth, even if it made people uncomfortable, especially then. That weekend I visited my sister. She had always been cautious, careful, her love conditional. She hadn't approved of the divorce, said I was giving up too fast, that every man has his flaws. I remember gripping the edge of her kitchen counter and asking, "Is cheating a flaw to you?" She looked away, didn't answer. But this time she opened the door and pulled me into a hug.
No judgment. No lecture.
Just warmth. Sometimes healing your own wounds teaches others to see theirs differently. That night, over wine and music, she admitted something. "I used to envy you," she whispered. I blinked. "Why?" "Because you had the courage to leave. I only ever stayed." Her voice cracked. And I realized something else. We're all carrying our own quiet rebellions. Some just never make it out loud. Back home, I opened an email from a gallery downtown. They'd seen my art online. They wanted to feature one of my pieces in a women's empowerment exhibit. My breath caught in my throat. I'd never even called myself an artist. But maybe that's what I was becoming. That weekend, I stood in that gallery beside a canvas I had once cried over. The storm woman. Strong. Wild. Unapologetic. And I watched women stop and stare at her like they saw their own reflection. A woman in her 50s touched my arm. "Did you paint this?" I nodded. She smiled with tears in her eyes. She looks like me. Or at least, the woman I'm trying to become. That moment stayed with me. Because healing when shared becomes a bridge. A quiet rebellion turned revolution. One night as I walked home from the exhibit, the city buzzing softly around me, I thought about him. Not with longing, but with clarity. He had taught me something important, by being everything I didn't deserve. He showed me who I never wanted to be again. And in that strange, painful way, he gave me the gift of finally choosing me. So no, I didn't thank him. But I released him. Because dragging his ghost behind me would only make my freedom heavier. That night I lit a candle. Not for him. For me. A small ritual. Quiet promise. I will never abandon myself again. One morning I woke up and didn't check my phone. Not for missed messages. Not to see if he tried again. I simply stretched, looked out the window and sat with myself. It felt foreign. And free. There was a time I couldn't go 10 minutes without wondering where he was, what he was hiding, or what I did wrong to deserve the silence he gave me so easily. But that version of me had grown distant. She was still there, in memories and flashbacks and certain songs on the radio. But now I met her like an old friend. Someone I no longer owed explanations to. I started walking every evening. Not for exercise. Not to pass the time. But because I loved the sound of my footsteps. Steady, grounded mine. There was a park a few blocks from my place. Small with worn benches and noisy birds. I'd sit there for hours watching people love each other loudly or fight quietly or scroll their phones like the world was behind a screen. I didn't envy them. Not anymore. Because I had learned something in my solitude. The most dangerous kind of loneliness is the one you feel while lying next to someone. Now I was alone. But never lonely. I met someone at the park one afternoon. A dog, actually, a scruffy little thing who ran up to me, leash dragging behind. Right after came a man, 30-something, glasses, rushed apology. Sorry, he gets too excited. I smiled. That's okay. I used to be like that too. He laughed, confused. We talked. Just a few minutes. Small things. Weather. Coffee shops. He didn't ask for my number. Didn't make it weird. Just a moment. Nothing more. But it was the first time in a long time I looked at a man and didn't feel bitterness. Just neutrality. Maybe one day even curiosity. Back at home I painted again. This time a woman sitting at a table alone. No wine.
No tears.
No performance. Just her, a book and a candle burning low. The title? Her Own Company. I hung it above my bed. Not to be proud. But to remind myself. I am not a half. I am whole. Ria and I planned a weekend trip. Nothing dramatic. Just the sea, salt air, and late-night confessions under string lights. We danced barefoot in the sand. We told stories from college. From the years we forgot who we were. I told her something I had never said aloud. When he cheated, I didn't leave right away because I thought it meant I wasn't enough. She looked at me, eyes soft. But now you know that his betrayal was never about your worth. I nodded. Ido. Now. It takes time to untangle your value from someone else's disrespect. But every boundary I set, every moment I said no or walked away or stayed silent when I could have begged, was proof that I had returned to myself. I started saying yes to new things. Poetry readings. A solo road trip. Cooking classes. The world didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt available. And through all of this, I didn't once wish to go back. Not even for a second. Not even to fix it. Because the woman I am now, she would never shrink to fit a man like that. She knows better. She is better. The call came out of nowhere. Blocked number. Late evening. I shouldn't have answered. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, picked up anyway. It was him. Of course. His voice had changed. Slower. Softer. Almost careful. Like someone trying not to wake a sleeping beast. Hey, he said as if no time had passed. as if my silence hadn't screamed louder than anything I could have said. I saw your painting, he continued. The one at the gallery. He paused. It looked like you. I didn't respond. He waited. And then with a sigh he added, I messed up. There it was. The apology. Flat. Weightless. Like tossing a pebble into a canyon and expecting it to fill the void. I stayed silent. Because what do you say to someone who tore you down and now wants credit for noticing you rebuilt yourself? He kept talking. Words spilled from him. Excuses dressed as honesty. She didn't mean anything. I was stupid. I miss you. I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity is not love. And it's definitely not a reason to go back to the place that nearly buried me. When he asked if we could meet, just to talk, I said no. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to say. And he had already heard every version of my silence. I hung up, peacefully, then turned off my phone, poured a glass of water, sat by the window, and stared into the sky, as if the stars were proud of me. He had always mistaken my kindness for softness. But kindness with boundaries? That's power. I told Ria the next day. She grinned. Blocked. I nodded. Forever. Good, she said. Let the past talk to your voicemail. We laughed. Felt like freedom. I didn't think about him again for weeks. Until one day I passed by a bookstore and saw a couple inside laughing over a shared joke. He used to laugh like that. But with her, whoever she was, it looked real. For a second I felt something sting. Not pain. Just the ghost of a wound that had once mattered. And then it was gone. As I didn't need to win. I had already won. Winning isn't being chosen. It's choosing yourself. Over and over again. Especially on the days when it's easier not to. I walked away from that window with a quiet smile. Let them laugh. Let them be happy. It didn't take anything from me. Not anymore. Because healing is not about revenge. It's about release. And I had finally let go of the version of me that needed him to understand what he'd done. I understood. That was enough. That night I painted again. This time the canvas held a woman standing on a cliff. Hair wild. Eyes closed. Arms outstretched. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was the storm and the calm after it. I named the piece. Unapologetically unavailable. My apartment felt warmer these days. Not because of sunlight or seasons. But because it no longer carried the echoes of waiting. Waiting for texts. Waiting for affection. Waiting to be enough. Now it held only the sound of my own footsteps. Grounded, certain, free. I started framing my art. Not just for galleries but for me. Each piece was a timestamp. A journal entry without words. They lined my walls now, visual proof that I had survived myself. One evening while organizing prints, I found a box I hadn't opened since the move. Old letters. Wedding photos. Receipts from anniversaries he forgot, but I remembered anyway. For a moment my breath caught. But not from grief, from gratitude. Because I could hold those memories now without trembling. They weren't blades anymore. Just paper. I burned the wedding invitation. Watched the edges curl black and vanish.
No ray. No tears.
Just release. A friend once told me, forgiveness is setting yourself free, and realizing you were the prisoner all along. I never fully understood that until that night. Later I lit a candle, put on music, sat on the floor with my favorite tea, and whispered to no one, thank you for leaving me. You made space for me to find myself. I didn't post it online. Didn't call Ria. Didn't write it in my journal. Some moments are too sacred for sharing. Some healing is meant to be witnessed by no one but your own heart. Days turned into months. I found myself saying yes more. To weekend trips. To messy laughter. To staying in bed until noon with no one to impress but my own reflection. The old version of me? She would have filled every minute. Worked harder. Smiled wider. Tried to earn rest. But this version? She simply allowed it. Because survival wasn't the goal anymore. Joy was. One quiet Sunday morning I hosted brunch. Ria, my sister, 2 new friends I'd made at the gallery. We laughed over burnt pancakes and secondhand mimosas. My apartment buzzed with warmth. And as I stood at the kitchen sink, watching sunlight fall across the faces of women who knew pain and chose power anyway, felt it. Wholeness. Not perfect, but complete. No one asked about him. Not once. Because they didn't need to. He was no longer part of the story I was writing. And that somehow felt like the final chapter had already been written. Without a dramatic ending. Without a final fight. Just peace. After everyone left, I cleaned slowly. Humming. Smiling. And I whispered to myself, "You did it. You came back." The first time I saw my reflection and didn't flinch, I knew I had made it. Not to some perfect destination. Not to a fairy tale ending. But to a place called self. And God, it was beautiful. I started smiling with my whole face again. The kind of smile that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that doesn't fear being too much. Because I finally knew I was never too much. I was only with someone who was too small to hold me. I got invited to speak at a local women's retreat. They'd seen my artwork, read my poems, followed my quiet journey online. They asked me to talk about healing. I almost laughed. Me? The woman who once begged for love in silence? The woman who once hid bruises no one could see? But then, I said yes. Because maybe the best people to talk about healing are the ones who had to claw their way to it. The night before the event, I sat with my notes. But I didn't write a speech. Instead, I wrote a letter. Not to him. Not even to the women in that room. But to her. The woman I used to be. "Dear you," I wrote. "You who stayed too long. You who broke quietly. You who smiled while crumbling inside. I see you. I'm proud of you. You walked through fire barefoot. And still kept your heart tender. You lost yourself. But more importantly, you found yourself. And even though he never said sorry, even though the world never handed you justice on a silver plate, you became your own closure. That's enough. You are enough." I read that letter out loud at the retreat. Voice shaking. Hands trembling. But heart wide open. When I finished, the room was silent. Then came the tears. The nods. The quiet chorus of "me too." Because pain, when spoken with honesty, becomes a map. A way out for someone else still lost. That weekend changed something in me. I was no longer the woman he broke. I was the woman who healed, loudly, proudly, and without apology. I took the money I earned from selling my first full art collection and opened a little studio, tucked between a coffee shop and a flower stall. The sign out front said, "For the women rebuilding." Inside, the walls were filled with paintings, all of them women in various states of becoming. Some crying, some dancing, some simply being. There was a corner where visitors could write letters to exes, to parents, to themselves. Some folded them, some burned them, but all of them let something go. It became more than art. It became home. For stories like mine. For women like me. One rainy afternoon, I sat behind the counter with a cup of tea when a young woman walked in. Her eyes swollen. Her voice a whisper. "I just left him," she said. I nodded. Offered her a seat. She looked around the room, at the paintings, the notes, the candlelit silence, and exhaled. I didn't know where else to go. "You're here," I told her. "That's enough." Later that night I cried. Not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. For the full circle grace of it all. For the fact that my wreckage had bloomed into someone else's refuge. People often ask me if I've ever dated again. I smile. Not yet. But maybe someday. Not because I need someone, but because I'd like to choose someone from a place of wholeness, not hunger. And that choice, that power is mine now. They also ask if I ever forgave him. And the truth? Yes. But not so he could sleep peacefully. So I could. So I could walk into every new room with light shoulders and a full heart. So I could look in the mirror and see someone who didn't let betrayal harden her. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for the woman writing this. The one narrating this. The one who lived it all and still learned to love again. First and forever herself.